Fellas, it's 1 week away from UFC 300, and even though most would consider this the greatest card of all time, personally I still think it's the most stacked card of all time. I don't think it's flawless, so I'm going to come up with 5 ways to improve UFC 300, and I'm also going to be including some things that you lot said on the poll that I did. I'm not going to switch around the fights or change anything to do with the fights, because that's kind of just switching the card around. I'm going to be doing things outside of just pure fighting, or the fight or the bout order that the UFC could do to improve UFC 300. So let me know what you think could be done to improve the card. Starting off with the first thing, and it's to bring back Mike Goldberg. This guy was one of the most goated commentators in the UFC. I missed this guy as a commentator. Now, he has been out of commentary for a while, especially with the UFC, so let's give him a week to to research the fighters. But if the UFC genuinely brought this guy back, that'd be insane. This guy was a goated commentator. Like, imagine Charles Oliveira goes out there, gets Arman Tsarukyan in a guillotine, slumps him out cold, and then we have Mike Goldberg going crazy on commentary. I think this guy would bring the energy that we need for UFC 300. I don't dislike John Anik. I think he's a great commentator, and I also think obviously pretty much every commentator would be better at breaking down fights than Mike Goldberg. I don't know if he still watches the sport, or at least keeps up with the sport, so give him time to research. But Mike Goldberg, this guy brought the energy back, and I feel like we need him back at least once. Like, just Mike Goldberg, and if there's one card that we need him back for, it's got to be the biggest card in UFC history, in UFC 300. So bring him back. I don't want to sit there listening to Joe Rogan talk about how Alex Pereira, it was crazy that he could make 185, or the fact that he's so dense, or the fact that calf kicks are so effective. I want Mike Goldberg going ham on commentary. So the first thing that the UFC could have done to improve UFC 300 is to bring back Mike Goldberg for UFC 300. Yeah, I think if you give him time to research the fighters, he'd do a good job. So that's the first thing I think the UFC could have done. Second thing is the canvas colour change. Now, obviously, they changed the canvas for UFC 200 with like a yellowy colour, and it was extremely ugly. Most people hated it, because why have they just given it... I think what they were going for is like a gold to represent champions, but it ended up just looking like a really sad, depressing, dark yellow colour. So I feel like if they were to change it to a more vibrant, different colour, I don't really care what colour they change it to. Just as long as it's not ugly, I don't mind. But I think a canvas colour change would be really good for UFC 300. Some people have suggested like a black and gold, since there's so many champions on the card. There's 12 current and former champions on the card. It would have made sense to have like a black and gold colour, and to be honest, I completely agree. I'm sure they're going to do it in a way that they can just spam a bunch of sponsors on there, because let's be honest, it's the biggest card ever. They're going to want eyes on their sponsors, so they're going to want it to be like a lighter colour. But if they were to change if they were to change the colour of the canvas, I had a Curtis Blades moment there. I think it would make the card. I think it'll make it a lot cooler. But as long as it isn't ugly, like yellow, black and gold would go, go hard. I heard someone say like a, dark red would go well. But yeah, make it unique to UFC 300. So one card, just change the canvas color. They could do it, like I said, they've done it for UFC 200, but as long as it's just not a really ugly color, I don't mind. So that's another thing, a canvas color change. I'm not really bothered what the color is, as long as it's just not extremely ugly. Number 3, we've got have every single fighter at the press conference. Now, maybe not every single fighter in one big press conference, because I don't think the UFC would want to risk having all them fighters at one press conference. The security budget would be crazy. But I wouldn't even mind it if they did like a press conference for the prelims and then a press conference for the main card. Or if they just went chaotic and just did every single fighter on one card, or at least the prelims. Maybe the early prelims you don't do a press conference for, but at least the prelims in the main card. I feel like they have to. It's such a stacked card. You can't really afford to just... you can't really afford to just have one average press conference. I already said in the video where the things that are wrong with UFC 300 that the press conference for this card is going to be dead. So expand it. Let the preliminary card onto the press conference. Let there be some prelims. It will be absolutely chaotic. You just have all the fighters there. It will just be chaos, essentially. Have the prelims on there. I just think they need a big press conference, or at least split it into 2, so that we have like a prelims press conference between the prelims fighters, and then later on we have one for the main card. But yeah, it's too stacked to not have a big press conference, and I feel like they need it. We've had big press conferences in the past. There were so many good moments to come from it. And even though I'm sure that Dana White is scared that something's going to kick off and ruin the card, just up the security budget. It's UFC 300. Let's have a big press conference. Let's have a longer press conference, and let's generate some hype for this card. So the third point that I've made is to have an even bigger press conference with every single fighter on the card. And if you don't want to do every fighter, at least just do the prelims in the main card. I think that would have improved the card massively. Next thing we've got is to improve the poster. I've already ranted on this in the past, but we're 1 week away from UFC 300, and it's looking like they're not going to change the poster. It's such a bad poster. You look at UFC 100 and 200, the poster was so much better for this card. They had the fighters, they had the insane cinematics. UFC is a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're coming up with posters that look like they were made on Microsoft Paint. It's the biggest card in UFC history, and it's arguably the worst poster. UFC 301 has a better poster than this. Pretty much every single poster you can think of has a better poster than UFC 300, but the one card that's the most stacked card in history, that's the biggest card in UFC 3, biggest card in history, has the deadest poster, just a yellow background with UFC 300 on it and the date. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know who designed that poster. It seemed like they had like a 5 minutes to make it and they were in a rush. But at least stick some fighters on there. Get a couple of the champions on there. Get every champion on the card or every former champion. Get the main card on there. Or at least have the 2 main events on the card. It's the most bland looking poster ever. And listen, I know at the end of the day, it's just a poster. No one really, rates a card based on the poster. But it's just a dead poster. And I feel like having a better poster, having just something better to represent the card would be better because... yeah, I just think it will be better. So have some fighters on there, improve the poster, and that's the next thing I think the UFC should do to improve the card. And then finally, please just eliminate every bad referee. We can't afford to have Mark Goddard with his early stoppages. We can't have Herb Dean elbow dropping opponents. We can't have that leprechaun midget of a referee that was, refereeing the Chris Weidman and Bruno Silva fight. Can we not just have Jason Herzog ref every fight? I feel like he's the only referee that's super consistent. He doesn't stop fights too late. He doesn't stop them too early. He doesn't have these terrible takes. As long as it's such a good card when there's so many banger matchups that I just don't want to let the card be ruined by terrible referee stoppages and decisions. That's all I want. I hope the card is flawless without terrible decisions. And if the UFC refs ruin this card, I'm going to be pissed because it's a good card with so many good fights. We can't afford to have these fights ruined by bad referees. So that's my 5th point. And then I've also got some extras that I got from my community post that I think would be a good addition. So the first thing is custom shorts. Now, I think custom shorts would be good. Let Max Holloway have his Hawaiian shorts. I think having custom shorts for every fighter would be a good addition for UFC 300. It would be quite unique to the card. Obviously, I know it's not the first time they've ever done it, but let the fighters make some money. Let the fighters represent themselves on UFC 300 rather than having the standard shorts. Are the UFC going to do it? Most likely not. Like I said, they're going to try and cash in as much as they can. They don't want to miss out on any sponsors, so they're just going to spam sponsors everywhere for this big card. But it would be cool to have custom shorts on the card, and I think it would make the card. It wouldn't make the card better, but I feel like it would just be a nice little improvement to the pay-per-view of UFC 300. And then the next thing that people were saying is have someone else on commentary. Obviously, I said have a Mike Goldberg on commentary. Some people said have Dana White on commentary. I don't think he'd do that. I think it would be quite awkward to have Dana White on commentary, the CEO of the company on commentary while the fights are going on. But having maybe, I don't know, like a special commentator or someone that's maybe a fighter or someone else in the UFC to be on commentary, I think that would be a good idea just for like a short period of time, maybe for 1 or 2 fights. But yeah, that is how I think I would personally improve UFC 300. Like I said, let me know if you'd improve how you would improve UFC 300. But it's a stacked card, but it's not a flawless card. But yeah, that's how I would improve it. Thank you for watching.